Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our IBM Sub-Capacity Licensing webinar. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to take care of. We will be recording this session and it will be distributed at the conclusion of this webinar in the follow-up email. We also want to encourage participation, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question and answer chat box at the bottom of your screen. If we don't get to your questions immediately, we will address it at the end during the question and answer portion of this presentation. We want to announce a giveaway that we will be doing during this webinar. We will provide our social links for you in the chat box. If you go to at least one of our social platforms and follow us, you will be entered into a drawing to win a gift card. We will announce the winner at the end of the webinar. That wraps up the announcements, and now without further ado, I will turn the time over to our presenters.
So afternoon or good morning to those that are joining. My name is Scott Warren. I'm going to go ahead and get into introductions. So let me see if I can go to this next slide. Okay, perfect. So you can see my mugshot there on the left. So I'm a senior consultant here at Angle Point. My focus is on IBM. So I assist with all things IBM compliance, software, anything that surrounds IBM. Prior to my time here at Angle Point, I was at KPMG, where again, my focus was on IBM licensing. And so that's just a quick intro into myself. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Mike Sarna. He's one of our VPs here at Angle Point to introduce himself and get into who Angle Point is. So Mike, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
And thanks, Alex, for putting this webinar together. Before I introduce myself, I'd like to thank everybody for joining. I know everybody's very busy with their day-to-day activities, so I'm hopeful that we provide enough value in the next hour that will justify the investment of your time. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. Of course, you could read what's under my name. It says over 35 years. At this point, it's 39. I graduated college in 1980 with a computer science degree, so you can do the math there. And as you can imagine, I've seen a tremendous amount of changes since 1980. I first got introduced to software asset management in Y2K. I had left a 20-year career with the phone company, and I joined a small privately held software company called Isogon, and our cash cow product at Isogon was a product called Soft Audit. So I was introduced to the area of software asset management. The whole discipline was in its infancy, so I feel like it was a great time to get involved. 5 years into working at Isogon, IBM came along and bought us. They saw value in our product, Soft Audit, and they wanted it. And so for 11 years, I worked at IBM in various capacities, usually in the service delivery area. I was always trying to get back to software asset management. So as fate would have it, back in 2013, the CEO of IBM, Ginny Rometty, was looking at different ways to protect IBM's intellectual property without doing audits. And she put together a task force, and I was chosen to lead what we call the Software Asset Management Project Office. I was the business unit executive in charge of that program. It was a worldwide program. So that's where I met Angle Point. So let's move the story along here. Scott, if you hit the slides, I'll start talking a little bit about that position, my last position at IBM, and how I met Angle Point. So in the position I had at IBM, I was looking to help customers that were struggling with ILMT. Guess what? We're going to be talking about that. Scott's going to get into all the nasty little details, but I'm going to give you the big picture, right? So I was looking to work with some companies that knew software asset management because I didn't have a big team. And everybody wanted to work with IBM, right? So, you know, to be a vendor of IBM's and help us with our software asset management needs. And so I had to put together a certification program to see, well, just who has the ability, the expertise to be able to, that I feel comfortable sending into my customers, right? And I put a very strenuous program together because I wanted to have a high bar. And a lot of people out in the marketplace that say we're involved with software asset management, we know software asset management, tool vendors, resellers, and the like, had the opportunity to get certified. And lo and behold, only one company that started out on the journey to go from bronze, silver, gold certification made it to gold, and that was Anglepoint. So I started working with Anglepoint, and I got to know the people and the company. I thought they had very high integrity. I thought they had great people. I never met anybody at that company who you know, wasn't very skilled at what they did. So excuse me, I got a question on my screen. So anyway, we put so when it was time for me to retire from IBM back in 2016, there was one place I wanted to go, and that was Anglepoint. And so they were nice enough to take me. And what Anglepoint is a global company, and we focus solely on software asset management. Now, when I was at IBM, we were only really interested in helping our customers with their IBM software, right? Because that was what we were concerned about. But from talking to all the customers that I worked with, you realize that the value proposition for the customer is not just one publisher like IBM. It's to get their arms around their compliance or license situation amongst all of their software publishers. And even beyond that, and that's the orange box you're looking at there, software publisher licensing specializations. And you can see we basically work with all the biggest publishers and the smallest ones too. In fact, people always ask me, are there any publishers that you won't work with? And my answer to that is, look, I'm not going to say we've worked with every software publisher that's out there. That nobody would believe me if I said that. But every once in a while, we'll get a customer who has a publisher that we haven't seen. But what do? We go and we do the research, and we help them understand what their licenses say, and we help them understand what they have in their inventory. So that's so we cover the full gamut when it comes to that. But we also help with SAM program governance. In fact, our CEO, Ron Brill, happens to be the chairman of the ISO standards committee at this time. He's very involved with helping with the standards group. And the yellow shape there, SAM tooling, again, we like to say we're tool agnostic, which means we're going to talk about IBM's tooling today, but not everybody just uses IBM tooling, right? They may have Flexera, they may have Vericent, they may have Aspera, Snow, and so we're not going to go into a customer and say rip out your tooling because you spent a lot of money on it, spent a lot of time. So we have experts across most of the major tooling areas, and we'll help with those tools. We know how to take data, let's say out of ILMT into a Flexera or a Snow. And so we work with what the customer has. And the last shape, the blue shape up there, Sam, I keep wanting to say squares, but what is that? That's a six-sided, I'll call it a polygon, but I don't think that's right. Anyway, the SAM managed service, and what that means is, it doesn't mean we're going to go in there and we're going to take over, turnkey, do everything for you. You don't need your own internal staff. No, what that indicates is that we'll get you to what we call a baseline or a position, a snapshot of what your compliance position is, an effective license position. But that's good for that moment in time. But what we want to help our customers with is to stay compliant. And so there are processes, and there's continual, let's call it business as usual, maintenance type stuff that has to go on. And you're going to hear a lot about that when we get into ILMT. So I think I've said enough about myself and about Anglepoint. So I'm going to turn it back to Scott, who's going to get into the real meat of the program.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Okay, so this is just a quick agenda. I'm gonna pretty much just skip over this slide and get into the thick of it. So you go to the next slide here. So general overview. So the number one thing to keep in mind or be aware of is full capacity versus sub-capacity. So the name of the webinar, right, is how to succeed with IBM Sub-Capacity Licensing. Why does that matter? I think I have in the second paragraph, this lack of understanding, it's by far the most common pitfall that is experienced among IBM customers. That unless you are fully compliant with IBM sub-capacity terms, you will be charged or counted against the number of cores on your physical host, not the VM. Okay, so most customers, when they're deploying IBM software, right, they'll assign it to a virtual machine, and they'll designate, say, 2 cores to that machine to run that IBM software. Unless you are sub-cap compliant, IBM will not count the 2 cores. Instead, if that box is sitting on a 32-core host, IBM will count the 32 cores, not the 2 cores on which the software is actually installed. Does that make sense? Feel free at any point, right, to send me a question inside the chat, or to please unmute and ask me a question directly. But again, we work with customers every single day who could have saved millions of dollars in audit findings and software spend if they understood what I just described, right, and how to maintain sub-capacity compliance. So that's where we'll start. So the main requirement, let me make sure I didn't skip any slides. Okay, so this is per IBM. The 2 requirements that they have is install IBM's license metric tool. It's known as ILMT, within 90 days of the first use of that eligible sub-capacity product. And then not just install it, but then also to produce and retain quarterly reports. So I put in parentheses the name of the report that's referenced here is the ILMT Audit Snapshot. And IBM wants you to retain those reports for at least 2 years and make those available if IBM requests those. Now, I did put a couple asterisks there. This is an important note, right? So if oftentimes customers, they'll read that first requirement and think, okay, all I need to do is just get ILMT installed. Get it installed somewhere, anywhere inside my environment. The reality is every deployment, right, that you're wanting to have counted at sub-capacity, every IBM deployment, so every VM, every virtual machine needs to have an ILMT agent installed, okay? If ILMT agents are not installed on every deployment, those that do not have ILMT will be counted at full capacity. The other part of that is that ILMT must also be maintained. And I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but When ILMT is first installed, it will go out and it will discover the IBM components that are on each box. And ILMT will make its best guess as to what product is actually licensed and or installed on that box. So it sees the components and it assigns those components to a licensable product. So for instance, if it sees DB2 on a box, it's going to take that DB2 and assign it to some kind of licensable product. Oftentimes, the default assignment made by ILMT is incorrect, okay? It's essentially its best guess. So unless you maintain it and you're looking at these default assignments made by ILMT and either A, confirming if they're correct, B, excluding them from being counted, or C, reassigning those components to the correct product that it should be mapped to, you're going to have, I think in the last sentence there, you're going to have a number of incorrect, unlicensed products that are going to show as over deployed. Okay, so again, it's not just getting it installed somewhere, anywhere in the environment. It's you have to get it installed across every IBM deployment that you want to have counted at sub-capacity. And then two, you also have to maintain it. Or else you're going to have a number of instances, default assignments made by ILMT that are going to count against your PVU sub-capacity exposure. Okay, now there's some exceptions to IBM's sub-capacity requirements, to their ILMT requirements that I just outlined on the previous slide. If you use an eligible virtualization environment that's deemed eligible by IBM, that IBM has not supported, or that is not supported by ILMT, that would be an exception. You're not required to, or I should say, your sub-capacity requirement, you have the exception if you're using an eligible virtualization environment that's not supported by ILMT. Okay, and I put in parentheses that I don't know if Mike knows, but I'm unaware of any currently at this time.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that level of detail, but it makes sense, right? If ILMT doesn't run in there, IBM can't ask you to run it. So
now the other part of this, number two, you can see that, and this does apply to customers, right? There's a number of customers that would fall into this category. In the first category, that they have less than 1,000 employees and or contractors. Give me 1 second.
well, Scott's
Okay, so I'm back here. So I had to take care of something real quick. So if your enterprise, right, if your company has less than 1,000 employees, that's part of it. The more difficult part, right, is the total physical capacity of the machines where you have IBM software deployed, right? So the full capacity of the box, so those, say the machines that have 32 cores, as long as that full capacity is less than 1,000 PVUs and you have less than 1,000 employees, then you would qualify and not have to install ILMT and not have to track it, not need to maintain reports, okay? Or this one's pretty obvious. The third one there is that if you're already licensed at full capacity and all you're worried about tracking is full capacity, then you don't need to worry about installing ILMT. Now I put, again, another asterisk here. For all the exceptions outlined above, right, except I guess for number 3, customers are still required to manually manage and track your sub-capacity consumption, okay? And maintain that for 2 years. And if I go to this next slide, you can see this is per IBM, their manual calculation worksheet. Now let me pull it up real quick, but I'll show you here. So this is the template that's downloaded that you can download via IBM. And it's just a worksheet that you go in here and you can see where they've outlined with an asterisk of being mandatory to, those are mandatory. You need to go in and populate those fields, right? And this is the report that they're wanting you to maintain on a quarter for 2 years. Okay, so I won't spend much detail on this, but it's a manual document that's provided by IBM that you can go and download via their site and work off of that worksheet. Okay, so licensing overview. Okay, so licensing overview, I'm going to go ahead and get into, let's see if I can click to the next slide. So license metrics, so on and so forth. So IBM has hundreds of different license metrics. If we were coming into your environment and helping you establish a license position, these are some of the most common license metrics that we see. And on a general high level, the type of information that we're looking at to identify or determine consumption. So authorized user is a very common metric. With that metric, we're trying to identify the list of unique users that have access to that product, right? A concurrent user, we're looking for a high watermark of users. So the number of users, the high watermark of users that were logged in at the same time accessing that product. RVU, this can be a number of different metrics. So for instance, with inside RVU, you can have client devices, cores, etc. These are tier-based. So IBM has a tier associated with each one of these. So the more instances or devices or cores that you have deployed, the less as you get to each tier that it will be counted out. So for instance, client devices 1 to 100 might be counted at a 1-to-1 basis. Devices 101 to 250 will be counted at a 0.8 basis, right? It's just a discounted tier based on the amount that you have deployed. And then last but not least, the main focus of this presentation, we get into PVU. Okay, so I'm going to get into the details. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a couple of questions out there. Maybe we address them now. I answered one of them as which was the alternatives to use an ILMT, and everybody can see that answer, I believe. And
okay, yep, I'm just seeing the comments now.
All right, and so there's a couple of questions there by Piatis McDonald.
Okay, so let me see here. What is the license rules of a VM? I have IBM products installed on experiences a disaster in VMware automatically brings up another VM. Okay, so this is more of a tooling question, right? I'm a licensing guy. So if you have, actually, let's do this. I'm gonna hold all these questions for the end. We have a Q&A section at the end. So please just keep sending in the questions. If I'm going through the presentation and you have questions, keep firing those off. And then when we get to the end of the Q&A section, we'll jump into each of these questions. So again, I don't want you to stop sending them. Please keep sending them via the chat, and we'll address those when we get to the end of the QA. Okay, so let me get back here to the next slide. So calculating PVUs. The way PVUs are calculated is you take the PVU per core, and I'll get into how you identify what that is. It's an IBM designated PVU per core assignment that they make based on the processor that you have installed on the physical host. Okay, so that's one part of the equation. The second part of the equation is you're going to take the number of cores that are on the physical host, if you're counting at full capacity, or if you don't qualify for full capacity, or you're going to take the number of cores that are on the VM, and you're going to multiply those two together, right? So you're going to take your PVU per core multiplied by your cores. And again, I reiterate, sub-capacity is the number of cores that you've assigned to the virtual machine, whereas full capacity is the number of cores that are on the physical box, the physical host. Okay, the first part of that equation is the PVU per core. Okay, so there's a link here you can go to, and it pulls up a table like I have listed here in this screenshot. So based on the vendor, the name of the processor, so the processor vendor, the processor name, and the model number, and then however many sockets are on the physical box, on the physical host, lets you know the PVU per core assignment that's made by IBM, okay? So that's the first part of the equation. You have to identify the processor type that you have and the number of sockets that are on that physical host. And then once you have that information, you click on to IBM's PVU table and you figure out what the PVU per core assignment is that's assigned to that specific processor and socket count. And then again, the core counts. So if you're counting at full capacity, so the second part of that equation is figuring out the core counts. So if you're calculating at full capacity, the way to calculate the core count is you take the number of sockets on the host times by the number of cores per socket, okay? And then obviously core count on subcap is just the virtual cores that you've assigned to that VM. Okay, now we're gonna get into a little bit of ILMT and how to maximize ILMT or what it takes to maintain ILMT. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. Okay, so again, I briefly touched on ILMT. It stands for License Metric Tool, IBM's License Metric Tool. It's a free IBM software asset management tool. And it's designed to help you maintain an audit-ready posture. Okay, so it's free. You can download it from Passport Advantage. I have a slide here that tells you some of the basics that go into downloading and installing ILMT. And I have an asterisk there. Customers you are responsible. You can download it. And it's a free purchase, right, through Passport Advantage. The customers are responsible for supplying the hardware and installation services that go into or are required for installing the tool. Okay. So basically the installation of ILMT is on you. That's up to you as a customer. So ILMT install quick overview. So you're going to make a $0 purchase of ILMT and Passport Advantage. You're going to download the install packages. Then you're going to build a server specific for BigFix, ILMT, and databases. So I know there was a comment here about BigFix. ILMT runs on BigFix. Okay, so you can purchase the BigFix suite of products, right? And that's essentially a paid for version of ILMT that has a lot more power behind it. If you just purchase the free ILMT version of it, you'll still install BigFix that it will run on, but it's a free watered down version of BigFix. So it still runs on a BigFix platform. So then number 4, you're going to install BigFix and ILMT once you have the server built. Then you're going to deploy the ILMT agent to all the servers that you want to track for IBM software. Right? If you don't have a very good visibility into your environment as to which servers are deploying IBM software, trust me, it's not that much bandwidth, and it's a lot easier to just deploy it across the entire environment. Truly, to deploy it across the entire environment than it is to get hit with full capacity. So again, I'm not a tooling expert, but the bandwidth, the resources that it takes up are very minimal. So if you don't have a good view into where IBM software is deployed inside your environment, safe than sorry would be to deploy it across the entire environment, deploy agents on every machine that you have. Number 6, you're going to configure ILMT. This is getting into more of the tooling, right? I'm not a tooling expert. Configure ILMT to run the hardware and software scans. Number 7, configure vCenter connections. And then number 8 is you're going to make sure and install or update ILMT with the latest software catalog and PVU table. So that's a quick overview. Now let's get into ILMT. So I'm going to open up a little demo of ILMT. Let me pull this up. I'm going to overlay this on top. Okay, so this is just a little demo that we have here. I think the first slide that I'm referencing is the health check. Okay, so these top 3 boxes here correspond with the health check, and you can see I have them listed on my screen. It's these top 3 boxes. These top boxes affect licensing the most. So this has to do with ILMT deployment and agent health. The goal is, if you look inside each one of these boxes, there's separate links and it has a percentage associated with them. So for instance, you can see this no VM manager data, and it's 33%. Per IBM, the requirement is you want to have all of these errors. These basically designate errors that are associated with ILMT, either the deployment health, agent to VM host connection issues where the VM isn't connecting to the host, so on and so forth. The requirement per IBM is each one of these errors should be no more than 5%. So you want to have each of these errors between 0 and 5%. Obviously, 0 is the target. Okay, and I think I list here in the slide deck, pay special attention to disconnected, to failed scan, missing software scan. You can see if you follow my cursor, a no scan data. If I come over here to this other box, no host scan data and VM manager data. I'll highlight no VM manager data is very common. Inside ILMT, when you generate an audit snapshot, it shows up the host, the physical host or the server shows up as TLM_VM. In those instances where there's an error and the VM cannot connect, or it's not associated with a physical host, ILMT makes a default PVU per core and PVU just makes a default assignment inside ILMT, and there's a very good chance that that PVU assignment made by ILMT is overstated. Right, so you might be counting 1,000, ILMT might be counting 1,000 PVUs associated with a product, but that could be completely wrong because it's using a default assignment because there's an error, a TLM VM error inside ILMT, and the VM isn't connecting to a host. ILMT can't identify what the physical host is associated with that VM, okay? Okay, now software classification. This is by far the biggest, most complex part of ILMT. So you can see, I mentioned before that ILMT will identify the components that are installed on a machine, and it makes its best guess as to which product those components belong to, and or which product, IBM product, is actually licensed on that box. The second paragraph I have there, these default component to products assignment, these default assignments are often incorrect, and they're listed as pending inside the software classifications, okay? They're pending. These here show 0. If I go over to my little demo, if I go to software classification, you can see there's 1 pending. Oftentimes, if you have ILMT and you log into ILMT and you look at your software classification, you likely have a whole bunch of pending software classifications, okay? To change these software classifications from pending to completed, it requires that human eyes actually go in and review each of these default assignments made by ILMT and confirm if the assignment is correct. You can confirm it, reassign it to a different product, or exclude the instance. And I put in parentheses IR, i.e. it's a DR server. So again, let me go to this demo. So I have this 1 pending assignment right here. So if I click into this pending assignment, if my little big fix will work and go, maybe this won't work. Okay, so software classification. So I highlight this, okay? This is saying ILMT recognizes this component on the box, and it's assigning it to this product, DataQuick. Well, I don't own licenses for DataQuick. So that is incorrect. So I need to go in here and I can either confirm it if it was correct. I can say, okay, click confirm, and that will change it from pending to completed. So I review it and I say, okay, this is correct. The default assignment made by ILMT, I own licenses for the product that it assigned it to. This looks right to me. I can see the installation path. I can even pull in the host or the VM that this is installed on, the box that it's installed on, okay? And I can confirm it. If I know that it's incorrect, I highlight the line that I want to reassign, and I go to choose from catalog. And this pulls up IBM's catalog. And you can see all these products that are provided by IBM as possible bundling options for this component, right? So these are all the products that I could assign this component to. So what you have to do is determine which product you actually own the licenses for. And let's see, Bigfoot's platform agent, I know this was a part of my license metric tool deployment. When I deployed ILMT, this is the component that gets installed, and I know that that belongs to my ILMT product. And you can see here, charged, it's a free product. So it's not going to show up as part of a PVU calculation or PVU requirement. And is this an IBM provided bundle or IBM provided software classification? Meaning, does IBM show that this component can be listed to this product? Okay. Now let's say there's a product in here that, or let's say this component, I know that this component belongs to a product that is not showing up as an IBM listed bundle. Okay, so I'm going to slow down. If you have a component installed on a box and you go in to reassign that component to the correct product, and you know the product that's licensed on that box, but in IBM's catalog, it's not showing the correct product. The correct product isn't listed in here. You can go in and do a custom bundle. You unclick this, you do a custom bundle, and now every single product within IBM's catalog will show up. And you can see how much bigger my scroll bar just got. So now, if IBM didn't have the recommended bundle, right, and I know the product that's actually installed on that box, I can uncheck this box, and then I can do a filter and reassign it to whatever product I want. I can send it to Cognos. I can send it to DB2. I can send it to whatever product is actually installed or licensed on that box, okay? And you search for it again. Now I'm going to recheck it, saying that it's listed as an IBM bundling option. Select it, assign it to ILMT, and off we go. And now if I go back, go ahead, Mike.
I'd like to make a comment on the bundling because I run into this all the time when I'm talking with customers. The bundling is the part of this process that really, I guess people just don't figure how difficult it might be or how time consuming it might be. And I've been with so many customers that said, well, I have ILMT out there and I ran the report. And then I'll ask a very simple question. Well, did you go through the bundling process? And I can tell by the look on their face or how long it takes them to answer that they really haven't. And so I say that because if you do not bundle, or if you take the default bundle, which is an option, right, you're always going to be overstating your PVU consumption, right? So you don't want to have to claim more PVU consumption than you need to. And that's why this whole bundling process is so important. And somebody asked the question about where to find the bundles. Did what Scott just went through answer that question? Anyway, I guess we'll get to it at the end if it's still a question.
Yeah, now one thing I did want to bring up that Mike just mentioned, okay, so you can see on here it changed from pending to completed, right? We went in and confirmed that the default assignment or reassigned it. And now that human eyes have looked at it and confirmed it, it changed from pending to completed. Okay, so now I clicked on all of the classifications that we have. Okay, there's a good chance, because this is just a demo, right? I only have 50 lines here. There's a good chance if you've deployed this in your environment across everywhere that IBM software is installed, each instance, right? If I look at these three, each different file path will create a new line. Every file path that you have installed, wherever that product is installed on whatever machine that it's installed on, is going to create a new line. There's a good chance that you have thousands of lines. And that exercise, and this goes back to what Mike just mentioned, that exercise of bundling is essentially you needing to go in and look at every line and either confirming if it's correct, reassigning it if it's incorrect, or excluding it. Now, I didn't mention the exclusion. So to exclude it, let's say this line right here is a DR box, right? And I know it's a cold standby DR machine. I can go in here and click exclude product from metric calculation. So saying I do not want ILMT to count this as a licensable instance. I can go in here and exclude it. It says, what's the comment that you want to exclude on there? I can put DR server and exclude. Now that will be excluded from the metric calculation. Okay. And again, to reiterate, right, it sounds pretty straightforward because I only have 50 lines. But if you have thousands of lines, really, to make sure that you're not being over deployed by ILMT's default assignment, you need to go in line by line and look at the install path. I can come over here. Let's see if I can configure this a little bit. So do you see this configure view on the right-hand side? I'm not showing the machine name. So if I want to, I can go to configure view and I can bring in what machine it's actually installed on as well. So I can check mark one of my columns. I can say, I want to show if I've excluded the instance, and I can check on the comment for the exclusion, and I want to show, it says I have a computer name already there. Let's see. Okay, my computer name's listed right here. But we just made an exclusion, right? So now I have a comment here, and you can see we just barely excluded this instance, and the comment that I used is DR server, and this is the machine that it's installed on. So for every machine and every install path on which IBM products are installed, it's going to create a line in here that you need to go in and confirm. It's a significant amount of work. It will take a lot of resources on your part in terms of human capital to have a product admin or an ILMT admin go in here and check each one of these. Oftentimes, it's going to take product admins to confirm these, okay? Meaning, hey, product admin that's over this DB2, I'm showing that this is being counted by ILMT. Can you confirm if these are all standalone deployments that require a license? Oftentimes your ILMT admin doesn't know the entire environment, doesn't know every product, doesn't know what's actually licensed, what should be excluded, what's bundled with something else, right? Maybe the product admin says that was part of a third-party purchase. It should not be counted as a standalone. So we can go in here and say licensed with Manhattan, right? Maybe it's licensed with a third-party product and I need to go in and exclude that. But that's going to take validation with your product admins to confirm these, okay? I know I'm spending a significant amount of time on bundling, but it's the most cumbersome process as part of maintaining ILMT and ensuring that your environment is being reported or captured correctly. And I have on here software classification continued, right? To go to your software classification, you can click on reports, software classification. This is the screen that it pulls up, which is what I was just showing inside here, inside of our demo. Another really important trick, right, to optimizing ILMT and succeeding with ILMT is thresholds, setting thresholds. So once you've made all of these proper assignments, you can go in here to reports. You can go to all IBM metrics. All IBM metrics is where you need to go to generate the audit snapshot that IBM requires, that you retain for 2 years, right? And it's a 90-day snapshot of your products. So in here, it will show all the products that I am currently showing as deployed inside ILMT, right? What products I'm actually deploying inside ILMT. And it will show the quantity or the consumption quantity associated with those products here. And then inside ILMT, if I minimize this so that we can see it a little bit better, I can go in and say, okay, I want to set my entitlement threshold. So I can configure view and I can set a threshold. And what this threshold corresponds to is what licenses you actually own, what the quantity of licenses that you own. And I can say, okay, I know big fix inventory. I know I own 1,000 set threshold. I know I own 1,000 PVUs of big fix inventory, and I want to set that threshold. So what this will do is if my metric quantity or my consumption approaches or exceeds my threshold entitlement quantity, I want it to alert me. I want it to say, hey, red flag, ILMT admin, you have a product that's about to go out of compliance. You own 1,000 PVUs, you're deploying 2,000 PVUs. This product, based on your entitlement threshold that you set, is out of compliance. You need to come in here and confirm if these are all standalone deployments, okay? So that's another optimization exercise that you can do to just make sure that ILMT is notifying you or letting you know is to set thresholds. Now, I mentioned just barely the audit snapshot. Right? So the report I have on here, that the requirement is that you retain this report for 2 years. To get to the audit snapshot, you go to reports, all IBM metrics, which is right where we were, and you click on this audit snapshot button. When you click on that, you can put a comment in here if you want that it's, for instance, Q1 2019, right? Because you have to retain quarterly reports. If you follow my cursor, quarterly reports, and retain those for 2 years. So you can do Q1 2019 and click generate. And what that will do is it will download a zip file of how all of your ILMT environment is currently reporting. Okay, I won't get into the details of the report, but it's a huge part of our managed service, right? We'll generate this report and then we'll put that into an actual summary table where customers can see the product name, the license entitlement that you own, and the deployment that is being reported inside ILMT. And the way you identify or pull that report to figure out your consumption or your deployment is through this zip file that gets generated once you click generated. Okay, I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to kind of cruise through these. So another really good perk that IBM has come out with recently is Flex Points. So how Flex Points work is previously when you'd go to purchase a product, you would just buy a perpetual license for that specific product, right? You'd make a license purchase. You'd say, okay, I want to purchase more PVUs of DB2 or of Cognos or whatever. So I'm going to make a purchase for that license number and that part, and I'm going to work with my vendor. I'm going to purchase it directly through IBM, through Passport Advantage, whatever, and you purchase a specific product. Problem with that is there may come a time where you no longer need that product, or you upgrade to a different product, or you find there's another product, IBM product, that works better for you. So you go out and purchase that product, whereas this old product just sits as shelfware, right? It just sits on the shelf. You don't have a use for it anymore. But hey, you purchased it, you owned it, It's perpetual. You have it for as long as until time, as far as you can see it, right? And again, the problem with that is it just sits there. With flex points, you can purchase a bucket of points. They're just points. And there are specific bundles, flex point bundles. Okay, and I put in parentheses cloud and IBM Analytics. So within IBM Analytics, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of IBM products inside IBM Analytics. You can purchase flex points for IBM Analytics and take those points and use those to purchase any products inside that bundle, inside that analytics bundle. And when you no longer need it, you delete it out of your environment, and those points go back into your bank to use towards other products. So it's not product specific anymore. You purchase the points and you can use that towards any products inside that bundle. Does that make sense? So there is essentially no more shelfware. When you no longer need it, you reabsorb those points and use those towards other products, okay? Now, real quick, just to wrap this up, I know we may not have much time for Q&A, but want to get back into, and Mike, I'm going to cruise through this if it's okay with you. I'm going to cruise through just Elevate, how we can help, right? Part of our managed service, Mike covered at the beginning, is we'll review your contracts, review your entitlement contracts, do an entitlement review, actually help you determine what it is that you own, what terms you need to look out for. We'll establish an IBM baseline, so not just PVU, but across all of your products. We'll let you know what you're entitled to and what you're currently deploying. And then we'll help you maintain it. So I think my fourth bullet point here is we'll help you keep ILMT, quarterly ILMT reports, generate those. We'll go through all of the bundling analysis. We'll generate an ELP. And then we'll also do annual or semi-annual non-ILMT deployment summaries. Let you know what you're using across all of your products, authorized users, concurrent users, so on and so forth. A big part of this is Elevate. So this is a proprietary software that was created by Anglepoint. And I have a demo here. I'm going to try and cruise through. It's not going to let me log in. All right, I mean, I'm going to log in, but I'm going to have to navigate to the demo. So it logged me out. The timing logged me out.
I don't think we have time for that right now. So
yeah, the only thing I do want to cover, though, I know we don't have time, but the one thing I do want to cover is the bundling.
Okay.
So real fast, let's say you use a customer, right? You don't have the bandwidth or you don't have the human capital to go through and make each one of those bundling assignments. With Elevate, there is an API connection inside ILMT, okay? And we can do an API connection into your ILMT and pull in all of, I'm trying to see if it's listed in here. It's API, it's not listed here. But we can pull in all of the bundling observations that are currently listed inside your ILMT. We can make the changes offline, right? Inside Excel, we make the changes. We do those changes inside Elevate. So if I come in here, this analysis, all of your machines would be listed here and all of the components on those machines will be listed down here. We can highlight those components and reassign those to the products inside Elevate. Once we've made all those changes ourselves, via API, we can then push those changes back into your ILMT. So essentially, we can do all the work offline for you, all of those bundling changes, all of those software classifications, analyze those, look at the file paths, review each of those with the customer, and then once those are confirmed correct, we can push those into your ILMT, right? So it becomes more of a review role for the customer, not actually going in and clicking around 100 times. We can do all that, okay? So I know we need to, let's see if we can answer a few of these questions. I'm sorry, I know we rambled on a bit, but.
One question that came in, not in the general question and answer window that I saw, It's a great question. I haven't heard it in a long time. That doesn't mean it's still not a great question. Somebody was asking if the tool has a call home feature. And I think that question is asked because, you know, nobody wants to share data with the publisher, right? If they don't have to. So I can assure you that there is no call home feature. You'll create the reports. The only one who's going to give that data to IBM, and that's true even if you're working with a vendor like Anglepoint, who's helping you create those reports. Nobody gives those reports to IBM except you. You own them. All right, that data is yours. And if IBM comes asking, well, that's a different story, but nobody's sending them to IBM without your consent. So I hope that answers that question.
The rest of these questions, what I'll do is I'll work with Alex to get the contact info, right? I'll go through here, see if there's any that I can answer fairly quickly.
How about the one about the subcapacity products being identified on an invoice? I never heard that one before, and I don't know. Is that something?
How can subcapacity products be identified on an invoice? So the way you identify subcapacity products is by looking at the license metric, okay? If the license metric says PVU or processor value unit, oftentimes when you download the license from Passport Advantage or you download your entitlements, or you look at an invoice, it will say the product name and it will say per processor value unit on the back end of that product name. That's the way you identify whether or not it's subcapacity eligible, is you have to look at what the license metric is. The two most common subcapacity products or license metrics are PVU, processor value unit, and then RVU, that's based on managed cores or cores. You'll see in part of that purchase, it will list what the RVU classification is. It will have
MAPC is the one that's offered at subcapacity. Managed activated processor core, I believe that's it.
Yes. Yep. Those are the two products that you've got to get ILMT installed on. You have to install ILMT if you want it to be counted at subcapacity, or else it'll be counted at full cap, right? Which I covered earlier. Okay, I see a comment on here for hyper-threading. Yes, that does impact PVU calculation. Absolutely. Again, that's part of an exclusion, right? And I can't get into the details, but yes, absolutely. You need to take that into account. If those are hyper-threaded boxes, right, you need to make that comment inside ILMT, right? So that you're not showing an over deployment, right? You're not showing, I can't think of the word, right? It's not going to show excess deployment in there. You used it earlier, Mike, but I just can't think of the word, right? You're not going to show a higher deployment, higher consumption, right?
Yeah,
you got to take that into account.
Right. Yeah.
Can you manually update ILMT instead of the spreadsheet? I'm not sure I'm not sure I understand the question there. Can you manually?
Yeah, because if you're using a spreadsheet, you're not using ILMT, right?
Yep, and that's where the only time that applies, that you can use a spreadsheet and use IBM's manually provided spreadsheet, is if you qualify for the exceptions. And the exceptions are that you have less than 1,000 employees, and you have less than 1,000 PVUs worth of consumption when measured at full capacity. So you have to take the physical host core counts, let's say it's on a 32 core box, multiplied by the PVU per core. And as long as across all of your deployments, that comes out to be less than 1,000 PVUs, and you have less than 1,000 employees, it has to be both, then you can do the calculation manually inside of a spreadsheet, and you don't need to install ILMT. Where can I find software bundles? I know we're down to our last minute.
I think you went over that one.
Okay.
Right.
Where can I confirm if an IBM title can be excluded because it is installed in a non-prod environment? This is not noted in the IBM LI Docs website. So I'm not sure I understand the question, but from what I'm reading there, IBM has production and non-production environments, licenses for both. They have licenses that you can purchase for both environments, right? If you're only deploying the product inside of a non-prod environment, you need to purchase a non-prod license. It's significantly cheaper. The non-prod license is significantly cheaper than the prod license, or when I say prod, the unrestricted license, right? The restricted license, you are restricted to non-production environments. If you're deploying that product inside of a production environment, it requires the production license. If you're deploying it inside non-prod, you can go and purchase a non-prod license, non-prod specific license. Bundling through Elevate, can we do something similar with ServiceNow? So with ServiceNow, you can go in and use it as a discovery and mapping tool, but there's no way that I know of right now. Again, I'm not a ServiceNow expert. You can maybe work with your ServiceNow provider, right? And maybe our ServiceNow experts might be able to configure.
Well, there'd have to be an API, right?
Yeah, it would be via API. So that same process that I explained, you'd have to have a way inside ServiceNow to connect via API to push those mappings, to push the product mappings that you've done inside ServiceNow and push those into ILMT so the ILMT shows the same mapping.
Hey, I know we're out of time. Let me just hit this last question here that I see. How can software asset management tools be leveraged? Are reports from SAM tools acceptable alternatives to ILMT reports? Flexera has a tool, FlexNet Manager Suite. They did some extensive development work and made a version that's called FlexNet Manager for IBM. There's not a blanket okay from IBM to use that. But it can be approved if you ask IBM if you want to use your Flexera.
And keep in mind, I'll add to that, you need to get in writing from IBM.
Yeah, and you have to the right version of the tool. And the question, if not, should license management be only done in ILMT? Well, for IBM, that's a good place to do it. Because you want to get to sub-capacity. Sub-capacity by far provides the biggest bang for the buck. So you need to make sure you're getting that. And ILMT is a free tool. You could use Big Fix Inventory, which is really ILMT, the commercial version of it. And what the difference with that is that it'll discover non-IBM products as well. So there's a lot to that question. Most companies use multiple tools for discovery. That's not uncommon. What we're going to do is we'll answer all of these questions in a document and send it out to everybody that was on the call. And I think that wraps it up because I know everybody's probably got to get to another meeting. I know I do. So.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your time. I'll turn it back over to Alex.
Thank you, Scott and Mike, for that great presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. If you have any further questions or would like to connect with our IBM experts, feel free to reach out to Scott or Mike directly or message us through our website. That is it from us. Thank you again for attending, and we will see you all again next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.